You and I with Rashmi Shetty is a human library audio podcast bringing in stories of people you and I can draw inspiration from. Welcome to the third season of this amazing story listening journey. Ordinary folks, extraordinary lives, their uniqueness and individuality, making them interesting to talk to and to listen to, each one of them completely connected to the voice in me and with motivational stories of moving beyond themselves to make a difference in the world. A reaffirmation of the fact: open your eyes wider. The world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. I've always believed that the most impactful leaders are those who speak from a place of deep authenticity. And that's exactly what drew me to today's guest, Rashi Goel. Reading Rashi's posts on LinkedIn, I was struck by her rare ability to balance the rigors of the DEI strategy with a voice that is consistently genuine, grounded, and bold. It's that authenticity that struck me. With over a decade of experience, Rashi operates at the vital intersection of strategy, culture, and leadership. As the head of the business impact vertical at the Godrej DEI Lab, she doesn't just talk about inclusion, she embeds it in the very systems of the organization. She moves DEI from a nice to have to a business imperative with tangible results. Love how she partners with leaders to ensure that inclusion isn't an afterthought but a foundational pillar of leadership. She also is actively shaping the future of corporate India by championing workplaces where everyone truly belongs. Listen in as Rashi shares her amazing leadership journey, which is rooted in values, truth, and strategic purpose. Hi, Rashi. Welcome to You and I with Rashmi Shetty. When it comes to thoughts, when it comes to women, I really liked some of the posts that you had recently published on LinkedIn and thought that it'd be ideal to have you in conversation. So, before we get into who Rashi is today, I'd love to know what little Rashi was all about. Where was your childhood? Where did you study? And how did you reach where you are today?
First of all, thanks, Rashmi, for reaching out. I've heard your podcast in the past, couple of them actually, and I like the way you've structured some of these conversations, and it's absolutely an honor to be invited to be a part of that conversation and experience it for real, like really sitting across you and having this discussion. So that's great. Coming to your question on who I am or who I was and have evolved to be who I am today. I'm someone who's born and brought up in Delhi, in North India. That's where my roots are. I was born into a joint family, which over a course of time did not remain as joint as I've experienced as a child, of course. But yeah, that's where I started off from. I think I spent a large part of my life, almost 20 years, in Delhi itself. So my thoughts on world and my views were primarily embedded in the way I saw things moving around myself. Of course, that's again the primary way in which you create your thoughts and your life and your views on everything that you might experience even later in life. Like some days I still sometimes think about, oh, this is how it used to be in Delhi, but apparently that's not how the rest of the world works. And but that's a nice way of just moving ahead and learning new things. So that's where I come from. My family is primarily a business family, so I've seen both my grandfathers, my paternal and my maternal grandfather, both set up businesses. uh, what I have actually learned from them as a little Rashi, because I do think I was very observant child, so to say, was the fact that how you start from scratch, but then you go beyond yourself in service, right? So I've seen how they've built businesses, how they've built their family along with that, and I've seen how they've built a community beyond that. So when I say a community, I've seen how profits from the business, when doing well, were used to fund local schools, were used to fund the temples, because that's how communities were formed back in the day. was used to fund community halls. So sometimes I feel very proud when I go back home and I see a small placard in the corner of the community hall, which still holds my grandfather's name. So those are very early childhood memories of who I was and how I've evolved. So because we were a joint family, I had obviously a lot of cousins. My paternal aunts were also living close by to us, so huge amount of cousins, so to say. But also the girls in my family we had a huge age difference. So I ended up hanging out mostly with the boys in the family. While I didn't know the term at that point of time, I was pretty tomboyish in that sense. And the views on what girls could possibly do and what boys could possibly do was very diminished in my view. Like I didn't really have a lot of sense around it because I didn't see that as a difference. That's some realization that I slowly had over a period of time, and that's what connects me to who I am today.
This is so beautiful. And, the concept of joint family is such a beautiful one to grow up with, which sadly today's kids miss out on. There are lots of pros. I know there are cons as well, but there are a lot of pros in that which we can derive our values from, and we get our values validated also immediately when we live with a lot of
Yeah.
extended family. But how are you in school, Rashi? Now, you were a tomboy, all right, but how were you in school? Were you more leaning towards extracurricular, co-curricular activities, sports, or were you like completely into studies?
When you point out this whole joint family piece, also, I realized I was the youngest in the family, also the youngest girl in the family. So I was a little privileged in that sense because I was a little more nurtured and a little more spoiled, is how those words were used earlier. I think my grandfather detested that word, but yes, I think he was one of the primary enablers to that feeling. But I think I was also someone who could not sit still as a child. So I was not a very studious kid. So I never had like the top grades in class. I was doing well. I was decently well. Like my family was happy with the grades I got. But I always had this, my mom uses that word chul of doing more, of just keep going and like not sitting for a second, ideal in that sense. So I was very much involved in co-curricular activities. So you name it, I was a part of it. I was in the science association of my school. I was in the discipline council, and which transitioned into being the student council member. I was in the drama and dance, groups whenever they were made for whatever festivities that schools created. I played sports with whatever was available. If you talk to people in my MBA as well, apart from doing what you're supposed to do is to study when you go to institutes like this, I was a part of sports committee there as well. I was part of the HR committee there as well. And I was part of the arts and cultural committee there as well. So there was not one venue that I left. So I genuinely feel that I wanted to make the most of whatever the world had to offer me. And that's the curiosity that I was brought up also with. Because when you see so many people in the house, you see so many avenues to learn, to engage, to derive from. I think I used all of that to also extend it to whatever environment I was exposed to.
And I think all of this made you a very natural team player as well, who would fit in wherever you go and make sure that. Were you also someone who was making sure that you would lead or you would be part of a group?
In hindsight, see, Rashmi, I can make sense of everything, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
was I consciously doing it to be a part of a team or to lead? No, I mean, in that moment, it just felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the fun thing to do. Like as children, what do you want? You don't have aspirations of, at least I honestly didn't have aspirations of, oh, I will reach X levels or I will become X, Y, Z. I still remember, I think one of my early slam books, remember, we used to have one of those as children, still read dreams like I wanted to become a hairstylist at some point of time, and then suddenly I wanted to become a doctor at some point of time. Someday I wanted to become a sports person. But there was no barrier. Basically, I lived in a world where dreams did not have a barrier, where I was encouraged to just keep experimenting till I figured what I possibly wanted to do, which clearly took a lot of time for me to come to. But then again, the environment that you come up with, and also like you said, when you live in a joint family, when you go in environments and schools which support you to just be together, be in multiple options to be in different teams. So if that one doesn't work out, you can always choose to be in a second. It did embed a lot of team sense in me. Like I also got that nuance of saying, I understand where you are coming from. I understand that we have difference of opinions. I understand that our belief systems are different. I think a lot of that, if I look back today, came from those early days of just engaging with so many people in different shapes and forms. Back in the day, uh, we did not have education on values or traditions were what you were called, right? So it's not like my parents or my grandparents sat me down and say, hey, these are our family values. It's something we just learned by observing everyone and how they were transactioning things and how they were dealing with good days and bad days. All of that we just learned by observation.
Correct.
And that team building leadership pieces, I think they came just naturally out of that ecosystem. I'm sure every individual in my family would have also embedded it differently. But that's how I sort of look back at it.
That's so true. And a lot of clarification of right versus wrong also must have happened in the process, both at home and outside. Because, like they say, everything is learnable, everything is not teachable. So it's how curious you are that expands you. But now coming back to your MBA, you mentioned you did your MBA. What prompted you to move in that direction? Was it something that was by design or by default? Because a lot of people around you were doing it.
I would say it was a mix of both. Like I said, I was also the youngest in the family, so I have an immediate elder brother who ended up doing engineering while I was still in my ninth, 10th, figuring out. I happened to score decently well in my 10th, and like how most people my age would resonate to it, because you got good grades, you had to take up science, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
what are you doing with your life? Oh, and I honestly, like I said, my dream still hadn't formalized to say I want to become X. So I took science thinking is the most safest option, because even if tomorrow I don't want to pursue it, all the other streams remain open, right? Which is not true. If you do commerce, you can't move to science and vice versa.
Exactly.
So I ended up taking science just thinking that hey, I still not figured it. Let me just keep this wide open. While doing those 2 years of science in my plus two, I was very clear that this is not something I can do day in and out. I'm not very good at it. I was okay, but will I enjoy doing this for whatever rest of my life or the next 5 years also? The answer was a clear no. My teachers also resonated with it, and they were like, while you are passing and you are doing what it needs to be done, we don't think you're enjoying this as much as, to make it a career. That led me to pursue BBA, which was like, hey, now what do I do? Coming from a business family, also the option was to be a CA, right? So if you're not becoming a doctor or an engineer, the third option that was to be a CA. And I was like, hey, again, to give a CA level commitment, let me first test it out with a course like BBA. If I feel that, again, this is something I want to pursue, I will enroll into CA because that has time. So I genuinely didn't realize at what time I became such a spontaneous person to take decisions based on how I'm feeling today. And I think that's also something that goes back to who I am today, is to say I always relied on what my feeling was. I always, and this is something that I recently learned, that your gut is the most
Yeah.
intelligent part of your body because it knows what to process and what not to. I think I have heavily relied on what I'm feeling, and that comes from my gut to say, Rashi, do this. At this point of time, it makes sense, right? So I did my BBA. I think during my BBA is when everyone around me was preparing for an MBA. I wasn't. Again, I was one of those who said, we'll figure. So, but I did realize that I enjoyed two subjects primarily, which was HROB and marketing. So I was like, something to do with human psychology, consumer behavior, because the two are pretty much, aligned in that sense of really getting to the root of what people feel and then designing processes and systems around it. Two different verticals in a corporate world, but in my sense, it's the foundation is very similar to each other. That's where I began, and I started my research to say, now now that I know I'm interested in one of these two, what do I do? And I happened to apply to obviously MBA institutes. I got selected at Xavier's, which is a very prestigious institute for HR. My brother happened to be doing his MBA at that point of time from Xavier's itself. A very different vertical, but that comfort of having someone,
Yeah.
also for my parents, that comfort to letting their daughter move out of their city to a different city, being brought up in Delhi and North India, it's not the safest. So their conditioning is to ensure that their daughter is always safe. I think those two really worked out well for me. Is to say I got into HR as a course which I wanted to. I got into a college which was prestigious and known, and my brother was there. So safety, interest, and future, everything I
Respect.
found in one location is why I ended up doing HR.
Okay. And once you were there and you were done, or through the course of your study, were you sure that, wow, this is what I want to continue and have a profession in?
Absolutely. I think just during my first 5 days at campus, one, just that campus itself, the life that I was living as a part of being on a campus with what 200 more people of similar age groups, but also just meeting faculties, learning what they will or how they will teach us more than what they will teach us. I knew that this was the decision. And now I think I have found my calling, if that's something, which of course changed over a period of time and we can talk about it. Uh, but then at that point of time, it did sound and felt like the right thing to do.
Wow. Okay. So you were in that moment where you found your purpose, your calling. And so through college, I'm sure you must have done well. But once you set foot into the real world, now that's where the challenge is of what you studied to what you actually were experimenting. How did your career move?
I think for me, the knowledge part was pretty set, right? So our grounding in our concepts in what to how to do our work was very clear. And that's an experience that 2 years of MBA really grills into
Hmm.
you is to you know your job well. So if you've done your MBA well, you know your job well. So there's no question asked. So I was a pretty confident individual when I moved out of like college into a corporate setup. What unfortunately our life does not prepare us for is realities of corporate, which are beyond your work, which
Hmm.
is beyond the job, the the description of what you're supposed to deliver,
Correct.
is the experience that corporate provides you. So for me, this was also so in my MBA. This is something that our professors really told us is if you want to be a great HR, if you want to be a really good HR, always do a plant stint. Always start your career or at least have one experience at the most as a shop floor,
Hmm.
because that's when you'll get the pulse of what HR truly means. You'll get the pulse of who employees are. You'll get an idea of who you're really serving. And that was great. So I fortunately got my first opportunity out of campus directly to work at a plant location. What no one told us or what no one prepared us for was that, specifically as women, that I would be one of very few. And I had not experienced that in life. Like in a joint family, of course, I had so many strong women leading houses, right? While I had not seen them in corporate workforce, but I'd seen them leading homes, I'd seen them have a voice. And I'd been brought up with boys. So in my head, there was no differentiation of how boys raise their voices versus girls raise their voices. But the moment I entered corporate space, I realized there was a certain expectation of how I should behave or how I should vocalize my thoughts. And that was a surprise, like not a pleasant one, but it was a surprise. Those realities are something that were hard to digest on some days, hard to navigate on others, and hard to express on most.
Nice. I like the gradation in which you just said the three parts. But Rashi, looking back now, do you think starting off at the shop floor was the wisest thing you did? Did it give you ground reality in such a way that you could handle yourself in any other atmosphere post that?
Absolutely. I still recommend the same thing to anyone starting their career, specifically in a domain like mine, HR. is to definitely start at a shop floor or at least have that experience once in your life,
Mm,
because what it teaches you, no other ecosystem can teach,
mm,
which is the humbleness of being there,
yeah.
uh, the feeling that people genuinely get when they enter workspaces, the
Mm,
real impact of what one livelihood does to a community. I think those are conversations that I had never imagined while I had seen afar when I saw my, parents and my grandparents do business and interact with, their workforce in general. Uh, I hadn't experienced it myself. I'd heard conversations, but just having experienced that myself. And also that is the feeling I had during that stint is what became my purpose in life later on, right?
mm,
From being an HR professional to moving and being a diversity and inclusion professional to being an advocate for women in corporate spaces. That grounding came from those experiences. And had I not experienced it myself, it would have been just another voice in the crowd.
mm,
So I genuinely feel that it was the best decision in life. I'm still grateful to the faculties who's nudged us to think about doing those roles and not opt for what you call a more fancy title or a fancier looking workspace. I do think it was the best decision to kick off where I did. And it was a great workplace. Like, apart from the subtle things that we anyways as women we experience, I think the workspace was built to encourage us to think beyond. Like, I had leaders who pushed me to do more, who pushed me to say, I know you're not heard in that room, but I'm here to hear you. That level of empathy. So all of those experience combined, I would never change that for anything else.
interesting. I want you to stay in that space and recall any particular incident or mentor that you had in that phase of your life who shaped your entire thought process, because that was a new space you were getting into, not something that you had mentally prepared for. Any particular instance or a mentor who kind of shaped you to who you are today?
It'll be very unfair if I start selecting one.
Okay. Any instance that
But
kind of
yeah,
brought you to ground reality?
and no, why I said that is also because I am who I am today because of the culmination of
Correct.
everyone who I've
Yeah.
met through this
Yeah. Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was blessed to have managers and leaders in different shapes and forms, showing me different ways of doing things. From some, I learned what to do. From some, I learned what not to do.
Mm.
So I'm grateful for each and every one of those. I think from an experience standpoint, and this was my first experience of being the only woman in a room, was when we had a plant meeting. And I was doubling up so there was a brief period where we didn't have an assigned head HR, so I was just doubling up for them being a part of that meeting. And until then, I had a female manager, so I'd never been the only woman in a room. She was always there. Uh, and I entered a meeting room and I realized that this room is full of almost 30 to 35 men, mostly engineers. I think 90% or 95% of them engineers, mostly between the age 30 to say 50, 55. Here I was a girl in mid 20s, non-engineering, uh, sitting at the table, slightly uncomfortable because I couldn't see anyone else like me in the room. Uh, and also a little like, that feeling of saying, maybe this is my moment. Maybe this is my moment where I'll find out if I am as confident as I feel I am, if I genuinely know the work I do, because everyone around me seems to be a skeptic about me being in the room.
Yeah.
I think that moment changed a lot for me.
Okay. And where did you draw your strength from in that room?
I genuinely relied on everything I'd learned. Like, I was like, I know my work. There is no way you can question my work. You can question my language, you can question my tone, you can question everything else. But I am like, I remember my father and my parents generally telling me about when you get into work, it's work,
Mm.
right? And those were simpler days when we were not connected always. So I've seen how my grandfather or my parents would come back from work and just switch off and, get into family mode. And then again, early morning, you'll see the same transition. The same things I had learned from them, the same things I wanted to imbibe and say, when I'm at work, I'll focus on my work and the delivery of it. So the confidence came from saying, I've done my MBA, I've done enough education, I've prepared, and on some occasions I did over prepare as well. Uh, but that confidence just came from saying, I know my work, uh, and I'm open to feedback. I think the second thing I was confident was, well, even if there is a problem, I will own it up and I'm open to making it better.
Mm. Okay, Rashi, this is something that when I coach women leaders, I get often that in a room where there are more men than women, the competence of the woman is completely shaken because her confidence is constantly questioned. So when these two are not balanced, that is when she needs to justify, and most of the time she keeps quiet. So, what would you tell women when they get into rooms like this, where they are in a minority, their confidence is not 100%, and thereby their competence is somewhere doubted? So, what would you like to tell them?
Unfortunately, for the larger audience in that room, I was not that woman who was silent. For to their surprise, actually, not unfortunately, but I think to the surprise, this was one woman very early. Actually, I was called a girl back then, not even a woman for that matter. Didn't stay quiet. I would say one, don't think of yourself as minority because you're not there because you're a woman. You are there because you're a working professional. You are there because you add value to this conversation. So you've been invited in the room because of that, not because you're a woman. So one is remove that lens of being a woman in that room vis-a-vis being a professional in that room. So that would be my number one thing. The second thing I've realized and this has taken a lot of learning to me myself, is to say people will see me the way I see myself. So if I see myself as someone who's confident, if I myself am sure of my capabilities, I don't think anyone around me would question it. Right? So those are the two things that I kept in mind, at least personally, that's what driven me to do what I've done so far.
And another thing that I hear is assertion is seen as being aggressive for a lot of women, while it's not the same with men. Is that something that you have noticed? Clearly, you've had a very nice set of mentors around you. But what is it that women need to do in order to come across as assertive and not aggressive?
I think do what you do. I would not change a thing about how women are assertive. I think it's about the mindset of the person, about tagging your assertiveness as aggressiveness. Because we all know if the same behavior was demonstrated by a man, it would not be
Yeah,
called aggressiveness, right?
yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, our views at how work is done or should be done are based on how men have done it so far.
Exactly.
Uh, what you will realize actually is women are very less assertive. They are more empathetic, more tuned to, they can read a room much better than our male counterparts. We can put across a message in a more nicer way. I'm short of words here, but just to say that they can put it in a way that is understandable by the larger audience much better than how our male counterparts possibly would have been able to so far. I know that the world is changing and our male counterparts have also learned this over a period of time. But one don't think women are aggressive generally. And honestly, if you are being aggressive, I'm sure you have a damn good reason to be aggressive. I'm sure that it comes from a place where you've been pushed in a corner and don't see any other option but being aggressive. So I would say go ahead, girl. Don't let anything stop you.
Yeah, that is actually good advice, but tough advice for people to follow when they are less in number. And there is this amazing hashtag that was doing its rounds where it said, let her finish. where if the few women in the room and the few allies in the room stand by the woman who started to say something but was quiet and go with, let her finish what she wanted to say, maybe things would be a lot better. So, over the years, from the time you entered the industry to what it is today, have you noticed a shift in the way the room behaves?
I would say in different spaces, yes, but in some spaces, no.
Hmm.
Like even today, if I go to a tier two, tier three city, work of one of our offices or plants, I still see the same. Some women are still the only in their team, some are still the only in their in a meeting. I still see some of those similar. I still see some men exuding uh, behaviors that are not inclusive or are not in line with the future of work. Uh, and I understand all of them, fortunately. Uh, like I said, just growing up with a lot of boys around me, my worldview was framed differently, but I was also a very observant child. So I knew that while I did not behave the way girls were supposed to or were expected to behave, there was an expectation.
Hmm.
I fortunately was a little, like I said, spoiled in the sense where I was given the freedom to not cage myself in those expectations. I still see those expectations at work. I still see expectations when I visit somewhere where people would have it from me. Um, has it changed? Definitely, yes. Now I have more women I can look up to.
Yeah.
Now I have more women I can talk to. Now I have more women I can mentor as well, which at that point, 10 years back, wasn't the way it is, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so a lot is changing, and I see a lot of male allies also coming up. Let's be very kind to
Correct. Yeah.
the ecosystem that we have been able to build. And I recently heard someone saying that we have raised a generation of empowered girls to become women. It's time we raise a generation of empowered boys, uh, because that's where the gap really was. And I see that difference today when I see moms raising boys. I do see a difference in how they are creating their worldviews. I see how fathers now behave, especially when they have daughters, and they come to the workspace and they now realize, oh, my daughter will enter the workforce 20 years from now. I better start making changes today.
Okay, good point to bring in parenting now, because that I think is somewhere very crucial. We are brought up in a patriarchal society, that is without a doubt. But where do you think parenting can make that difference in the way we bring up our children? Because I'm sure from the time that you and I grew up to the time that is there today, things have changed a lot. Society has changed, but then certain values have stayed really strongly rooted. So, how do we as parents and how does parenting play a role here? Like they say, no, we have brought up a generation of empowered girls, but we've not made our boys ready for them. So, how do you make the boys ready?
So, how I briefly touched upon it earlier, right? In a family, you don't sit down and learn values in a formal way. It's not a structured conversation on these are the ethics, this is how a family works, this is what inclusion looks like. You learn all these things by just watching people around you. You learn it by seeing how your elders treat each other. You learn this by seeing how decisions are made and who is making the decisions. You see how disagreements are handled at work or in your home, sorry. Uh, you see what is getting celebrated and what is getting questioned. So these are the few things which technically become your first classroom, and your home is your first classroom, right? Uh, so, for example, I have a young daughter, a 3.5-year-old daughter, right? When she sees us at home, she sees me and my husband as equal partners. So it's not like mom will come back from home and she will be the one responsible to manage the house. That's not a view she has. For her, she can ask her father or her mother equally for food, for any other requirements that she has in life, right? I think that's where inclusion begins at home.
Mm.
Uh, from an era where we were brought up to say kitchen was out of bound for boys and only girls were doing related activities, to girls being tagged to playing ghar ghar and boys playing cricket,
Yeah.
to us giving opportunities irrespective of gender. So if a boy wants to play kho or ghar ghar for that matter, to a girl wanting to play cricket or a football should be okay if that's what you want. It shouldn't be, hey, you are a boy, you should not play this and you should play that. To you are a girl, you should not do that. Because, like for me in school, we didn't have an option to join cricket team because there was no girls cricket team. There
Yeah.
was no girls football team. We were pushed to places which were more female like or which fitted the norm, which was we played kho. At max, we played basketball. Uh, you know, we were supposed to wear skirts. Even in Delhi winters, I was expected to wear skirts. I think I was one of those few girls wore pants in school. Because I was like, hey, it's so cold. I don't care what the dress code is. I want. Like those very small choices which we let our children see us make on a daily basis, to saying how the achievements of a children's mother and a child's father are equally celebrated at home. How the mother does not become the default parent or the default caregiver for everyone, where the father and mother are together making decisions. And it's not like for every decision, mother is saying, I'll check with your father and come back to you, but it's a we will discuss and we will let you know. I think those are very subtle things in which you show how women and men, we are equal partners in this journey, uh, irrespective of the roles we might play on some days. Like I say, a home is 100% ecosystem. On some days, you will be a 20%. On some days, you'll be a 50-50%. You'll
Yeah.
cover up for each other. But it can't be that the one person is always the 70%. So that shift, fluidity in your roles needs to be something children experience daily.
Wise words. And now coming back to work. So, when it comes to HR over a period of time now, what is it that you've noticed? Because today it's not a woman only exclusive department. There are a lot of men in HR as well. So, what have you noticed as a shift, Rashi, over the years with the HR department per se and the attitudes that come in there?
See, one interesting thing that has happened with me is I corely moved into diversity, inclusion, and equity as a domain
Mm.
3 years into doing HR as a generalist. So that one worldview now, how I looked at the HR process was with the DEI lens on. So that was one journey that I've had. HR, I think it's misconceptualized to be a very women-oriented function because if you look at most of the leadership in HR as well, you will see a lot of men there.
Mm.
So it's not like men weren't there. It's just that because it has been looked at as a softer function, people assume that women will do it uh, because that's what we are expected to do, right? Women are supposed to do the lighter side of the work. People don't realize HR is also not a light job because
Yeah.
we are possibly dealing with the most dynamic resource an organization can have, which is people,
Yeah.
uh, right? Within HR as a function, I think more transitions have happened on the way HR is driven in organizations, the way HR is impacting organizations, the way leaders are looking at HR. I think that transition I've seen from HR being a function where a business leader would tell this needs to be done, and the HR will be more at a transactional role, to seeing HR sitting at the business table and saying, if this is where the business wants to be, this needs to be the people strategy. And if we don't do this, business will not reach here. So
Mm.
really proactively having those conversations, to also integrating how inclusive the society is becoming, to integrate how the worldview is becoming into how it reflects on organization is one of the most challenging things I think HR is doing. Because earlier generations used to take 20 years. Now generation change is happening in as short as 5 years, right?
Yeah.
With this new thought process, with these new ways of working, how HRs are able to adapt the work environment is becoming so critical to the success of an organization. And not just that, for an HR to daily think about the success of every individual in an organization, I think is becoming the most challenging part of the job.
Yeah. So, according to you, you also said that 3 years into HR, you moved into DEI. That space of the DEIB and everything that goes along with it. What is it that you realize now over a period of time, being in that space has altered, has made it convenient, has made it easy? And how have you, as a professional, altered in your thought process?
I would say I'm still, from a professional standpoint, the same. Uh, I think I'm a person who leads with feelings and then builds on data and evidence to ensure what I'm doing is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
Uh, how diversity and specifically in the Indian context has evolved from a definition standpoint, of course, is where we were having conversations earlier on bringing women into the workforce. The conversation has now widened to say how can we bring people with disabilities into the workforce? How can we be more inclusive to people from the LGBTQIA community? How can we look at more diversity beyond these three cohorts to generational diversity and a lot of other personal characteristics that one brings in, which can be your caregiving responsibility, irrespective of which gender you identify as, which can be your socioeconomic status, structure, which could be your support system beyond work. So I think DIB has sort of evolved in that sense over the last 7 years of me being in this domain now. Um, and interestingly so, because now we are more focused on research within India. Earlier, a lot of research when I started my journey in this space was based on what the US thought.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
with the backlash that US has had on I feel privileged to be working in India in this space to say now we are more equipped to make decisions and make, structures or process based on our own research, based on our own experiences, because we've had the time to experiment with what was happening globally and then customize it to what India as a context needs.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Because if you open any research, any study, it's hardly about India. It's more about the US and the countries outside. So I'm glad that the backlash there has had a positive effect here in India. But more than that, another big challenge is AI. And AI has hit all of us. So where do you think the marriage happens between all of this and AI?
I don't get me started on AI. It's something I myself am figuring out at this point of time. I feel lucky to have much younger team members around me who are also acquainting about every new AI product that comes in the market and the possible use of it. There are a few things I like about AI, which is how it simplifies things, how it can be an enabler in a journey in terms of thinking, in terms of brainstorming, in terms of just simplifying some of the processes that would have been very time taking otherwise, especially when I started my career, right? I love that part about AI around how it really takes away some of the load in terms of time taking, right? So it
Hmm.
gives me more time to do more work.
Hmm.
It reduces my time from very time taking activities, which were pretty simple but used to be time taking. It's taken that away and giving me time to really do work that I want to read more, research more, and think more honestly. What I don't like about AI is the way it's being trained, especially because I work in a field which is around diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah.
My concerns with AI is being fed data, it's being trained with information that essentially is not inclusive.
Hmm.
I am not comfortable with the loose ethical guidelines around AI.
Yeah.
I am not comfortable with not knowing how my data is being processed and used by whoever owns that data now, right? Because now everything has AI. I mean, this conversation we have would possibly be recorded by a AI, and then, I don't know where it will go when this conversation gets released. Some AI will read it, and I don't know how it will be used. I think my concerns with AI is around that, especially on the training of this AI, because if we have diverse cohorts working on building an ecosystem or building a system like this, I would have more confidence on a system like that. Is to say, if I ask AI today, who is going to be the CEO or who do you think a CEO is? And it does not pop out a male image. It asks me that question. Do you want it to be a specific gender rather than just popping that image out? If you ask AI today about, just simple translation, and I saw this on LinkedIn itself, someone had posted about it. I'm forgetting the name of the author, but they mentioned when they asked Google to translate from English to Hindi of saying, I am cooking, it automatically translated in a female's voice saying, मैं खाना बना रही हूँ. And the moment said that I am driving, it was in a male Hindi word which said कि मैं गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ. So how did that assumption happen? Because someone trained it to assume that cooking is a female job and driving is possibly a male skill set. Those are things I'm not okay with AI. I love the fact that it's simplifying a lot of work that would be time taking.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a fear that many people had in fact expressed right at the beginning, because most of what AI does is takes from data that is already available. And as far as women are concerned, the data there is disturbing for it to give us the real data. And thereby it could be skewed as far as recruitment is concerned, the ability of women is concerned, because data is not up to date on that. And so the flip side is that if we go completely AI, then this is something where women will be most affected. But that apart, when you are talking about women per se as professionals, Rashi, there are so many women who, if you notice, at the point of entry, the number of women to men are equal. But as the ladder starts getting really narrow and the choices start increasing for women, most of them back out or are forced to. So, what would you like to tell women who are in that confused state about staying on, putting up, moving up, holding on? What should they do in order to make sure that they are leading lives which is satisfying and happy for them?
Rashmi, I think it's clearly about choices.
Yeah.
I think one is for us to be very clear of what makes us happy. The choice is on us first. As a woman, I think I need to first clarify what my priorities in life are, what is my circle of control, my circle of influence, what genuinely gives me happiness. I think break that down very clearly for us. We seldom do that. We mostly came into the expectations that the world around us has put on us. But I would say that is very crucial, is to first sit with yourself and clear those priorities out. I think the second step is to see what support system or what ecosystem is available to help you sort of make those priorities work in the way you want to do, right? So just to give you a parallel, I think 10, 15 years back, we did have a village around us, which was available, which was, just there. You didn't have to ask. Now we live in such a dynamic world, and unfortunately, that village has vanished. And women are expected to do much more than they were doing earlier, right? Because when I say I was brought in a joint family, I know that responsibilities of the household were also divided amongst not just one woman doing it, but multiple women doing it. And because most of them didn't have a career beyond home, it was something that was more easily manageable. And for the few that who had careers outside, they were also being their homes were being managed by other women around them because that village was so available, right? Unfortunately, that's not the reality today. The reality today is to build that village, I might have to seek paid support, right? Which is fine. I would say for women, that is also a challenge because we feel so guilty about building that village for ourselves. Like, I mean, honestly, if your priorities are clear, you will not feel guilty about building that support system for yourself. And I think lastly would be having very honest conversations with people around you about what you really want, like that assertiveness that we discussed. needs to showcase not just at work, but in every discussion that you have, which is also beyond work. Like, so let's say I have an important meeting at work and there is something that's come up at home. Am I having an honest conversation with my partner at home to say, this is important for me. My work is priority at this point of time. I feel this is something even you can pick up, right? We both are equal partners in this house. So you pick it up today. The next time you have a important meeting to go to and there's something else up, I'll pick it up on those days. Unfortunately, we don't do that. Unfortunately, when I speak to a lot of women, I have to really tell them, did you ask your husband about, can he step in for that? And they're looking at me as if I've asked them some alien question. And that agency on your own life is so important, is what I would possibly push women to say is think about it. Also, I keep going back to this one quote that I read is you cannot fill from an empty cup. So when you clarify your priorities, you know this what fills my cup up. So when you fill your own cup, will you able to give to your spouse, your children, to the society, and do all the caregiving responsibilities that you want to do. I know you really want to do it. Uh, but be okay on some days the ball will get dropped. So, this whole analogy of rubber balls and glass balls. You should know what your glass balls are. You should know what your rubber balls are. And if the rubber balls are falling, be okay with it. So if that means you need to take pause from work and that works for you, please do it. If you want to step back from work, please do it. But if you have the opportunity to grow up and your ecosystem and your support system you have been able to build in a way that it does, please move up. Then you know, don't lose that opportunity because you're also paving the way for a lot more women to follow you. You're also setting an example for more women to say, oh, that's also a way it can be done. Because see, I saw my mother as a homemaker for most of my life. She started working when I was in class seventh or eighth, right? So this was her first job. So for me, also seeing the transition and how she was managing home earlier to how she was managing later was a life lesson when I had to do it myself. So had I not had that experience of seeing a working woman, I might not have known that there was another way of doing it. So build that ecosystem, and I would say talk to more women. We also get into a shell and we don't talk to enough people because we are so afraid of asking for help, and it's not help. One of the reasons I so actively write on LinkedIn is just that if one woman can read it and if it makes even the slightest impact on her, my day is done. Like I've done my job well. I've made the impact I wanted to create. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers your question here.
Yeah, it does. And when you spoke about self-love and self-compassion, I think the pandemic was one space where all of us understood the value of it. And we paused to do that and understand whether we are doing it for ourselves. Yes, of course, most of us turned caregivers, but are we also pausing to take care of ourselves? The pandemic is long gone and life slowly has come back to what it was. I thought the lessons would stay, but clearly it hasn't. What have your takeaways from the pandemic been?
It's like you said, it seems like a long gone period, but it's still so fresh in our memories because it's genuinely not that long back, right? Uh, the pandemic is also one of those experiences that's just so hard to summarize because it was just so much going on at all at the same time. And it changed everything. It changed the way we work, it changed the way we live, it changed the way we were viewing things around us, right? But at the core of it, what I think is it really brought us back to what really matters. It really brought back conversation on, hey, now I know where to put my time in. Like at a personal level, for me, it made me value time in a very different way. I have started valuing time with my family, with my loved ones, with myself much more than I was doing earlier. Things we were taking for granted during that time just felt so fragile, right? That you end up valuing it more, right?
Yeah.
Those one of those moments, right? It was also that moment where you were forced to look inward, to really find meaning beyond your routine, to really think about what is your purpose in life. Because what were you reading during COVID, right? You were reading death tolls as if there were some numbers and there was no human behind those numbers, and suddenly it made you feel like a number that tomorrow it could be you. I think I asked myself at that point of time, what I'm doing, is it even creating an impact? Will even one person remember me, or will I also get counted as a number sometime in life? I mean, it was a horrid thought to have at that point of time, but those were thoughts that were coming, which also forced you to think about well-being in a very different way. It forced you to think about the whole idea of village. Uh, I mean, like for me, those clarity was what COVID gave me. Uh, it really it changed my priorities. The way I was explaining how women should set their priorities, I think for me it changed a lot. While I was fully deep in work until then, uh, to changing and saying my work needs to be meaningful and it needs to give me joy day in and day out, to how connected I feel to my parents, to how I have set up my own village. And when I say village, and this was unfortunate reality that I saw during COVID, was my village includes the paid support that I have, the paid support that lets me do what I do. And a lot of people forgot about them during the pandemic. I think those moments made me realize how truly blessed I was to have the ecosystem, to be able to, or have the support or the privilege to be able to not let go of my village in a difficult time. Uh, and it did redefine the meaning of having some of them in my life, right? Because just hearing of loss at such a large scale
Yeah.
uh, is so difficult to process.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that feeling ever again, but I know it's changed me for the good.
Good to hear that. Really good to hear that. Because for a lot of us, we lost a lot of loved ones, and it kind of shook us at the core at how fickle life is, and thereby make the most of whatever you have. And yes, at this note, we've reached a point where I would love you to share three life lessons, Rashi, that you'd like to leave us with.
Yeah. My, I've thought about this a little, and they're very simple things that I think I genuinely live by or try to live by on a daily basis. Is number one is to treat people the way you'd like to be treated. I mean, it sounds very obvious, but genuinely doesn't happen that often around us. So that principle is very grounding in the way I act on a regular basis. I think the second is, and this is something I've learned from my family, of course, is that no work is big or small. And I've seen that across my journey of,
Yeah.
you know, if you, what you do matters more than the label attached to that work. So my work should be impactful, irrespective of how big or small it is. And it's changed the way I see roles, hierarchies, and structures in my own journey. Um, and then lastly, I think it is something I am recently learning is don't be so worried about the larger impact. Like we all want to create impact, it's the most beautiful thing to do, but don't get overwhelmed with the idea of creating large scale impact. You need to often think about if you can impact one life in a meaningful way, that is enough. Because if you can make genuine difference to one individual, that is real impact. So don't think about changing huge systems, don't think about influencing industries or thought processes, about making measurable differences. Have that as an end goal. I do have that as an end goal. But on a daily basis, I only think if one person can take away something from this discussion, can take away from one post that I write, that is the level of impact that you should think about. And these are something that will evolve, right? This, while it's true today, I would say
Yeah.
these are learnings that evolve. The first two I have realized have just stayed with me for the most part of my life.
Yeah, yeah. Simple, grounded, and so you, Rashi. Well, Rashi, at this point, any inspirations or role models that you think have inspired you to become who you are?
Talk about inspiration or people I get inspired with, I did subtly mention on that I'm inspired by people around me. Now, this was one personal anecdote that my mom actually reminded me not recently, a few years back, was at school when we were asked to be, come in fancy dress, dressed as people who we are inspired by. And children around me were dressed up as Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi and all the other inspiring. I don't remember the others that dressed up, but I ended up dressed up as my grandfather. I ended up with a muchi and a dhoti and a Nehru jacket. Uh, and I saw that that was how simple I had seen life to be. I could resonate more with people I was seeing in flesh, knowing how their thought process works, knowing their life journey much closer than people I was seeing on screen. Like definitely an Indra Nooyi inspires me, Alina Nair inspires me. I'm inspired by a lot more women in the corporate world and beyond. But the true inspirations that I can really take from life are the ones I've directly interacted with. So that would be my parents, my grandparents on both sides, my immediate managers, my peers, my team members, because inspiration can come from anywhere. And
Yeah.
I do feel that one person can't be an inspiration. Like I personally can't be anyone's inspiration. There are parts of me that you can be inspired by, but me as a whole, you can't be because my journey is so different from who you are that you might resonate with some parts of the journey, but it's not possible, honestly, in my view, to 100% resonate with my journey. So be very wise with who you pick up as your inspiration.
Thank you so much for this conversation. And God bless you for whatever your dreams are, wherever you want to see yourself. And if your purpose and calling has moved from where it was, has it? I forgot to ask you that. From the day you began to where you are today, has it moved?
It's an evolving process, Rashmi. I do feel we should not get fixated at one idea of what that vision looks like. I
Okay.
would say it started off with very singular concept of how can I make my life better, to saying how can I make the life of a few women around me better, to now moving it at a more large scale organizational level and also increasingly thinking about more underrepresented community. So if you have to really drill down and say, yes, the basic purpose of it remains the same, but the way I look at it sort of is evolving as I grow and as I experience newer things in the world. So I do encourage people not to be fixated on one idea of success and keep that as a dynamic definition for yourself. And be a little more kind to your words yourself as well.
Yeah. So right here, one final question is your definition of success, Rashi.
I mean, it might seem very simple. Uh, I think there are two things how I define success is if I'm greeted at home with a huge smile every day, to can I sleep peacefully at night, knowing that I've done what I was supposed to do today. Like I said, I'm not thinking of large scale impact. So now I've reached a point where I say one impact. What is that one impact? In today's reality, it is to see my daughter receiving me at home with a smiling face, to me having a peaceful night, knowing that I've done everything that needs to be done, or whatever I could do in my own capacity.
So, wishing you all those smiles every time you reach home and see your daughter, and peaceful nights for a long, long time for the work that you do. God bless you and all the very best. Thank you for this conversation on You and I with Rashmi Shetty Rashi.
Thanks, Rashmi. It was a pleasure being here, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation as well.
Likewise. With that, we complete this episode of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know inspirational people whose story needs to be heard. You can write in at rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com.